All right, so my name's Jeremy Davis. I'm a solutions architect at Red Hat. I've been at Red Hat for 13 years. I have been around Atlanta for longer than that. We were talking earlier, this is my 18th time attending Devnexus. So I was at the first Devnexus. I was out of town 1 year. I had to be out of town for work, so I missed that one. Other than that, I've been at every Devnexus. So it's been really great to watch this conference grow and to what it is today, right? So I'm going to talk about Quarkus today. Quarkus is Red Hat started it, Red Hat's supersonic subatomic Java framework. So let's see, let me get a feel for the room. Also, if you guys have any questions, just throw them out. Feel free to interrupt me, no problem. I only have 3 slides, so there's not going to be a lot of slides. We're just going to be doing actual coding for most of this time. We'll build some apps. Has anybody used Quarkus before? Okay, a couple people have used Quarkus before. Has anybody written part of Quarkus before? Yeah. So yeah, no pressure. It's always fun when people that write the code are sitting in the room watching you present, right? Their work. So Spring framework. Everybody familiar with Spring? Probably a lot of Spring Boot stuff. Okay. Anybody use like Micronaut? It's kind of similar to Micronaut. Okay, very cool. Yeah, Micronaut's really nice. Okay, so this is where you can find me. You can email me. You can tweet to me. I didn't put my Mastodon thing. I have a Mastodon thing yet. Is anybody really making use of Mastodon yet? Yeah, a couple. And that's my blog that I started. So Quarkus started as the next generation, right? So JBoss made an application server, and Red Hat had an application server for a long time. And Quarkus started as kind of the next generation of that. And there's a couple of things that drove it. One was the notion of Kubernetes, right? We thought, yeah, Kubernetes is going to be really big. People are really going to buy into Kubernetes. And cloud native was already a phrase. We thought not just cloud native, what can we do to be Kubernetes native and really kind of bake Kubernetes in at a fundamental level and assume that you're going to deploy to Kubernetes, or at least make it much easier for you to deploy to Kubernetes, because Kubernetes can be kind of a pain, right? All that YAML, it's so much better than today's when we had all that XML, right? Yeah, right. The other big thing driving Quarkus was this concept of developer joy. And I don't know if they got this from Marie Kondo, but does anybody know Marie Kondo? Like the woman, she comes in and cleans your house and like gives you joy, right? So they made these Marie Kondo jokes anyway about Quarkus is going to bring you developer joy the way Marie Kondo, brings you joy in your house of having this nice, clean, neat house. And then my last slides, so my only 3 slides, this just has some links and stuff. So when they send them out, there's a couple of links on here, as well as a book, Quarkus for Spring developers. If you're a Spring developer, the guy who is immediately right after me, and his presentation is quite good. It's Quarkus for Spring developers. He was a longtime Spring guy, contributed to Spring, came over to Red Hat and began using Quarkus, and so he wrote a book about his impression of, coming from a Spring background. Here's how I see this, and how I kind of translate things. It's a really good presentation. Also, lots of live code. And he will be signing his book, which we have at the Red Hat booth. And you can always just download a PDF of this book, too, for free at developers.redhat.com. So I mentioned I absolutely want you to try this at home. So the easiest way to get going with Quarkus is to go to quarkus.io and start coding. Actually, before we do that, I'll show you there's the other really, really nice thing I like here is read the guides. And I don't know if this was planned out. Did you guys plan this out as a team, or if this just organically happened? But these guides are probably my favorite documentation I've ever had on a technical project of any kind. And you can come in here and filter. Let's say I want to learn how to do CRUD apps, right? I come to this guide, and really in about 10 to 15 minutes, you can work your way through this guide. If you type everything out, 15 minutes to 20 maybe. But you can learn how to do this, and they're very easy to go back to and use as a reference point, right? So if I want to use, let's say I want to do Kafka, right? We'll do some Kafka in a minute. Kafka reference guide, getting started with small I reactive messaging, right? So you can come in here, pop through, work through these. All this code is also on GitHub, right? So you can just clone it and run it if you want, but you can walk you through these things. So it's really nice, really easy to get to use these guides. I highly recommend leveraging them. They're really, really nice. And I lean on them all the time, right? Because you can only keep so much stuff in your head. So start coding. So this is the easiest way to get started. We start coding here, and it's going to help us bootstrap our app. Let's get started coding. Quarkus on its own is really tiny and really small and lightweight. I mentioned it was Kubernetes native, and there's two pieces about that. One, it needs to be lightweight because we're assuming we're going to run in the cloud where we don't want a lot of resources, or we don't have a lot of resources. Certainly our companies don't want us to use too many resources because the cloud can get expensive that way. And it does this in a couple of ways. One, it's a very small core engine, and then has extensions, so you add anything on top of it. The second piece it does is it allows you to use GraalVM to compile down to a native binary. So if you want to use like a function or a lambda, you can compile Quarkus to a native binary and execute even faster. In general, Quarkus is roughly the size of Node.js. Compiled to a binary, it's even smaller, right? So you can get close to like kind of Go type speeds with that. That's better for functions though, because the JVM does so much work, behind the scenes that if you're a long-running application, you'll typically have better performance on the JVM. Now, these extensions, as you notice here, there's a lot of extensions, right? So extensions for just about anything. There's, data stuff in here, right? So, even more extensions, right? We have messaging extensions, reactive stuff, all kinds of cloud things. There's stuff for AWS, for Azure, Google Cloud. There's all kinds of extensions. A lot of these come from the community. Some of them are supported by Red Hat, so you get a lifecycle and stuff. The API for writing extensions is pretty simple to use. You can see there's a lot of stuff in here. And one difference too, when you use GraalVM to compile to native code, it goes through and the path of your application, pulls everything together and compiles that native binary. So you can't just use anything. If you're going to run on a JVM, you can pull in any kind of library you want, right? It's not going to be a problem. You're running on the JVM. If you're going to compile down to native code, it helps to use these extensions. These will all absolutely work. And then you can try other stuff as well to see. All right, let's get started. Let's we will use REST. We'll go back to the page. We'll use REST Easy. And I'll use REST Easy Reactive JSON. We'll just build like a CRUD application. And then for database, let's use Postgres. And let's use Hibernate Panache. Let's use Hibernate ORM with Panache. Has anybody heard of Hibernate Panache? No. Okay, one person. Excellent. So everybody's heard of Hibernate, right? Everybody knows what Hibernate is. Panache is a really nice extension to Hibernate. So let's get a new Red Hat. We'll call this Devnexus 2023 Quarkus intro. That's a long enough title. Hopefully that's not already in my GitHub repository. So now this is going to build this application, push it over to my Git, copy that, and then if we want to see it, we can pop this up here. So I'm already in Git, right, in my project. So let's come back here. Can you guys see this okay? Is that font big enough? Okay, whoops. And I need to type git clone twice to do it. Flags. All right, so I like to use IDEA. So let's do file new module from what directory am I in? Oops. Clone this into the appropriate directory. And so I already have solutions here. So I am doing live coding, but I'm not insane. So I do have, I have a cheat there in case I mess anything up, right? Yeah. Actually, what I'll do here, let's expand like that. See that? Okay. All right, so that's the solution code. So Quarkus intro here. This looks like pretty normal looking Maven project, right? So source, main. One difference here, we've got Java and resources, right, which you normally expect from a Maven project. We also have this Docker file, right, Docker folder. Inside this Docker folder, we're assuming you're going to build images, right? So as Kubernetes native, we're going to assume you build images. We've got files for your JVM. We've got files for native if you're going to build the native binary. So we make it really easy right here already for you to build out your Docker folder. It also comes test. It's test first, so we can run our test. Let's stop tracking my mouse. All right, there we go. Test. And of course, your test is probably going to pass here to start with. So download the internet. Did we have a release? And our test passes. That's good. So let's come back here and look at our greeting resource. So this is pretty bland stuff. Now, this concept of developer joy starts with dev mode. So let's kick off Quarkus dev mode. And we can kick it off with Maven. There's a Maven. CD Devnexus. 2023, Quarkus. CD, Devnexus. Oh, I put 20. Oh, this is a way in the future presentation. I'll reuse this. All right, so we have a Maven wrapper file here. Clean, compile, and there's a Maven plugin, so I'll use the Quarkus dev method from the Maven plugin. And we're gonna spin up here and boot up. Oh, I meant to add that next. So there's a little trick here. It says no hibernate entities were found, right? So JPA is disabled. So it saw that I have hibernate, ORM in here, but I don't have any entities yet, so it's not really worried about spinning that up. But it did go do something here. Dev services for the default data source started, and it says container ID. So it notices that I'm running Docker, and I'm going to use a database. Yeah, I'm going to recommend Docker Desktop, of course I will. It recognizes that I've got Docker running, and I'm going to use a database, and so it has spun up a Postgres server and configured it for me, ready to use. So I'm not going to have to do any kind of configuration when I start doing database development. So first of all, though, let's look at our local host. So there we go. I mentioned dev services. We can go to a dev UI, and this is going to show us we've got some stuff in here. It's got my configuration. It's got entities, persistence units. We'll jump back to that more in a minute when I actually have something to show. And we have our little hello endpoint, right? So what do we have here? Hello from REST Easy Reactive. That's kind of dull. So let's say hello Devnexus. Save that, come back here, and we're good to go, right? So hello Devnexus 2023. Devnexus 2023. So it's watching the files, it's compiling in the background. This is a really nice, fast event loop, right? If you're used to using Java, this isn't so typical. If you're used to using Node.js or something, right, it's typical. And now when the Node.js people tell you how slow Java is, you can kind of, just punch back at them a little bit. Let's say, though, one other thing now we noticed here, it says tests are paused, right? So let's R to resume our testing, and we're probably going to have a problem here. Yep, we got a problem here, right? My test is failing because, of course, I've changed our tag from hello from REST Easy Reactive. So to fix that, let's split this out into a config property, name equals greeting, we'll call it string greeting, and we'll return greeting, right? Return greeting, and then we come over here to our resources folder. We have an application properties file, and let's type greeting equals git clone hello from REST Easy Reactive. The problem with doing this, though, is that now I'm going to have this message again. So what I'll do is I will set this, I'll parameterize my greeting with a test mode, right? So I come back here, there we go, tests are now passing, right? So I've got a test mode. I'm going to need to add this into my dev, though. So let's give my default greeting will be hello Devnexus 19. 19th Devnexus, we'll do that. And so even with properties file, we're still going to reload really, really quickly. Now, let's do some CRUD stuff. Let's come over here and say, I'm sorry? Does it use, I'm sorry, what? Some Jakarta specifications, right? So we do have a lot of Jakarta stuff. We came out of JBoss and the whole Java EE background, but it's not entirely that. But very good. That's a really good question, and actually dovetails nicely into what I'm going to show you, because I'm going to show you some Jakarta stuff here. But we don't we don't tightly adhere necessarily, and we do some stuff that's not complete implementation. So we don't have EJBs and stuff like that, right? But let's build an API. So let's say a greeting API. Let's say, and what we're going to do here. So we're going to create one of these things, application scope. We're going to create one per application, right, and have it in here. And we can do stuff like, I need to give it a path, right? So say path, right? So this looks familiar coming out of greeting API. What is greeting? Import. And say, we'll do a post. posting like JaxRS. So public greeting, add greeting. I don't have a greeting yet, so let's create a greeting here. Whoops. Create a class greeting. So now I'm gonna, this will be my entity, right? So we'll save these and we'll do create an empty constructor because Hibernate needs an empty constructor. Let's create some getters and setters. Yep. And let's do a toString. And then I'm also going to say extends Panache entity. So Panache is an extension to Hibernate, and it's going to give us a lot of functionality right out of the gate that's really nice. So what I can say here, actually, let's say greeting. I can call this method persist, right? So I don't have to like spin up a database or do anything. I get that for free with the object because I've extended the Hibernate entity. I can do other stuff. I can search, do like list is persistent flush. I can search on these kind of things. Let's do this. We'll say persist, and we'll return the greeting, right? So let's pull up Postman. Should have a post here. Greeting text hello. And I now have a greeting in there. Hi. Can you guys see that well enough? So I'm getting back that, and my ID is automatically incrementing. We come back over in here. Let's change my logging permissions here so we can see some stuff. And I'm going to cheat. I'm going to copy my logging here. So we'll do another one of these. And if you notice here, now my database ID is back to 1. So because it noticed the change in the code, it dropped and recreated the database for me. So like while I'm doing iterative development, it's going to clean the database out for me. I mean, it's assuming that I probably want to do that. You can turn that off. So now I've got Hibernate selects, right? We can see the SQL, right, that I've got created here. So let's do a couple other things. We can get nope. So I've automatically grabbed this. Let's do a get. We'll say public list greeting, all greetings, and we will return. On the main class, I can say list all like this, and I can just return a list of greetings. So if we come back here, we can say post. I can add a greeting in here, add hi, add hello. And then we pull a get here. And I'm pulling the greetings back, right? So I can just do this list all command. We can do the same things. Let's say we want to do like a patch, right? Patch, whoops, I need an @ symbol. Update our greeting object here. So we'll say, actually, we should probably also do this. We say param. And we'll say long ID greeting. So then what we can do is we can say greeting to update equals greeting, and we can say find by ID, right? I'll use my find by ID method, get an ID, and we'll say greeting to update set text, updated greeting text, right? And we'll say greeting to update persist, and return greeting to update. So we need that. We need a path. So now let's see, our databases will dropped again. So whoops. Oh yeah. There you go. So send that in. We've got hello. We've got hi there. And now if we're going to do a patch, we can patch greeting number 1 and change it to hi Devnexus. Change it to hi Devnexus. So we're doing patch on our, I'm saying maybe we can do a delete. Delete will work kind of the same way, right? So we just say delete, transactional. Yep. Give it a path. So let's just copy this kind of the same way. Except I don't need the actual greeting. I just need an ID, right? Get that? All right. And I can say greeting find by ID and then delete it, right? So I can delete an ID now too. Post one of these. ID 1, delete, say ID 204. If I get all my greetings, I should have no greetings. No greetings, right? So build a web app fairly quickly. Now, so everybody's done some Spring too, right? So in a minute, you'll get like a whole intro to Spring, but if you're comfortable with Spring APIs, we can spin up a Java class, we'll call it Spring API. And we'll say it's a request mapping. I might have to cheat on the Spring stuff. I'm not really good with Spring, so. Request controller and request, I'm just gonna copy this whole thing. I don't really know Spring that well. I did a ton of Spring, and then I started working at Red Hat. I haven't done Spring quite a while, and then I spent most of my time in Quarkus. But so let's just copy that, and I'll put it over here. I forgot one thing. Now, Quarkus also has a CLI, right? So I added those extensions with the web app, so I can also add extensions here. So I can say Quarkus ext add Quarkus Spring Web. And it says extension's been added. All it really did was add this into my POM file, which, okay, it's grabbed it. It's reloading my POM file. Now I can import. Now I can import everything. So I'm going to use the actual Spring syntax here. So if you're used to using Spring stuff, it's going to make it a little bit easier to get started, right? So I've got request controllers. Looks just like regular Spring stuff or Spring stuff that you would use in Spring Boot, right? I've got a post mapping, patch mapping. Other than that, the text is basically the same, right? Same kind of stuff we're doing. It just looks similar to Spring, right? Avoid delete. So I still have some red somewhere. What is that? Line 55. Do I need to? So my Spring, something's still red here. It's still red. What file? What did I call it? Spring. Oh, I just called it Spring API. All right. So Spring API. So if I come here, I should have a Spring API, right? I should be able to do a post for Spring. Spring post greeting. So hello Spring API. Yeah, let's start the server again too. Compile, Quarkus, dev. There we go. So let's say we got our Spring API. There's our Spring API. There's our kind of regular API, and then where's our Spring Get? We got a Spring Get, right? Spring Get. Yep. So now we got a Spring API. And you were mentioning you asked somebody, who's the guy that asked about JAX-RS? So JAX-RS, we want to do the same thing. we can come in and build JAX-RS APIs. I like JAX-RS APIs anyway. I think they're a little bit easier. Java, not a Groovy class. New Java class. Let's say JAX-RS API. All right. And do you guys use anybody use JAX-RS? Do you guys use JAX-RS? Anybody? Yep, a couple people, okay. So I like JAX-RS APIs. I think the way they give you this little DSL is really nice. So we have a post, we do the same thing, say transactional, say public, the response API, I just like using this, so add greeting, and we say like greeting. Other than this, it's pretty much the same thing, right? So let's see, where's our add greeting? Yeah, we can say greeting, persist, and then we say return response created URI create / plus greeting ID entity greeting build. So I like this DSL. I think it kind of makes sense. We have the response created. You can also say response OK, response deleted, right? So we can send that stuff out. And then we do this. We have a JAX-RS post. We need to give this a path here. So JAX-RS greeting, and we're so 44 not found. JAX-RS greeting. Oh yeah, spell that correctly. So it gives us our header back, right? So it says the location and stuff, right? Otherwise, that's pretty much the same thing. All right, so let's say that we wanted to do something else. Let's say we've got our API kind of built right here. But let's say we also want to start taking greetings from Kafka, right? So let's say we want to get a Kafka endpoint, right? So let's say new class, say Kafka resource, right? Application scoped, which gives us one of these in the application. And I need to add in my Kafka functionality, right? So stop the server again, can add in Quarkus extension, add Quarkus small reactive messaging Kafka. So I've now added in reactive messaging Kafka. And what I can come in here, let's see. Create a logger. And let's say incoming, we'll call it greetings topic, right? That's a reasonable topic. Say public void on greeting, and we'll say actually we're just taking a string of text here. Yeah, I'll take a greeting. I'll take a string text, right? And I can persist a greeting where we've already done this, right? But let's say that we want to use a repository pattern, right? Instead of just using an active record pattern. So we want to do we'll inject something. So also with the dependency injection, right? So we just inject method here, and we'll say greeting repository. Greeting repository. Let's create this thing. And in this case, I'm going to want to make it application scoped. I'm going to implement a panache repository for my greeting object. And now I can get all the same functionality, but in a repository. So now what I can say is greeting equals new greeting. I'll say greeting set text, and I'll say greeting repository persist greeting, right? So I can use a repository if I want to keep things built in that way, keep things behind the repository. You can also override these methods, right? So if I wanted to add some kind of functionality into there, I could do that. So greeting repository, and then I'll need a transactional, return at transactional, right? So now let's come back and start the server up again. And so this time it's gonna go out and grab, or actually I've already got a Postgres. It's also gonna go out and grab Kafka and spin up Kafka, right? So I'll have Kafka waiting. We have Kafka consumer is there. Kafka's on localhost 32787, right? So let's say we're gonna do Kafka. Let's just use kcat, right? So Control R, kcat. And let's see, my port. So by default, it's going to grab random ports. So we'll take a look over here on our dev console. So we're going to. So it's going to grab random ports. So Kafka UI is running on what node? Let's see. We're running on 32787. Host 32787. Greetings. All right, and so I'm going to say. You see what I'm saying? Hello, Kafka. Ah. Kcat B localhost. Is it 32787, 32787 T greetings. -P. Is that, it's not going to cooperate with me making a producer? Ah, that's right. Hello. All right, so now we see, did we get a hello in our database? We didn't get a hello in our database. Because I forgot to put in my wire. So I need to wire in Kafka here. I need properties files to tell it to bind onto this. Grab these. And I have to bounce the server for Kafka because it binds to the topic at boot up. So we boot up and we bound to Kafka. All right, let's go back to Kafka. When it reboots, it'll grab a different port. So I'm going to be on a different port right now. And actually, it'll tell me that when I boot it up. It'll say what port it grabbed on. So Kafka is on 32788, right? So if I'm going to do this, I'll say kcat producer localhost 32788 and topic greetings, capital P. Oh, B. And a P. Hello, Kafka, not hell, Kafka. We won't do that. And Control D. So we have why is that not being sent? Oh, that's hello. That's the wrong one. Wrong get. Hello Kafka. There we go. So now I'm putting stuff in through Kafka. Does anybody now? If let's say so Kafka. So the way these dev services work, right? So we're kind of assuming we're doing microservices, right? So it spun up Postgres, it spun up Kafka. Now, if I build another microservice, dev services is going to think I might want my own database, right? Because microservices typically have their own database, but it's going to probably understand that Kafka is most likely running because I need to communicate with this other microservice, right? So let's come in and create another service here. Bless you. And this time when I boot up, it'll just grab the other service. Does anybody use Quarkus, Camel, Apache Camel, integration stuff? A couple of Camel fans? All right, so let's do, so I already created an app using the website. You can also use the CLI, so I can say Quarkus, create app, we'll say com, Red Hat, and we'll say Devnexus 2023 Camel Quarkus intro. And I'll give it V1 instead of a Maven-friendly number. All right, so I've now created that Quarkus intro. ls, let's go dev Nexus 2023 Camel Quarkus intro, and I'm going to add these extensions. Start with Camel, so Camel Quarkus core. Oops. Yeah, I got to tell it to add an extension. Extension, add, Camel Quarkus core. Let's add Camel Quarkus FTP. I'll FTP a file up to, or actually I've already FTP'd a file up to an FTP server with a bunch of greetings in it. We'll grab that, we'll parse that, and we'll pop it over onto Kafka, right? So Camel Quarkus FTP. And I think file, hopefully that's everything I need. Let's pull this into here. File, new, module from existing sources. Devnexus, Camel Quarkus intro. Grab this. Close out of those. What happened to my Camel file? New module from existing sources. Did I not want Camel Devnexus? Camel, Devnexus, Camel Quarkus intro, right? Maven. All right, there we go. So this is going to look very much the same as the last file. We will just create a route builder, right? So in Camel, if you haven't used Camel before, we'll say an FTP route. All right, so what Camel does, Camel makes it really easy to connect just about anything to just about anything else. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to extend route builder. And a Camel route, let's say I need to override public void configure. And what Camel does is say from, and we're going to say from our FTP site. And we're eventually going to say to, it's going to be Kafka, greetings. Greetings is our topic, I think. But I'm going to want to split this too. Let me cheat, Camel. So what this route does, I'm going to, from our FTP site, I'm then going to set my logging level. I'm going to log that. I'm going to split the body, convert it to a string on new lines. I'm going to name the file name, and then I'm going to pop that onto the Kafka topic, right? So we'll basically get this file of greetings. The file of greetings is a little list of greetings I have, and then this will run by itself when it starts. I need the string for the FTP, and I've got already on here, let's see, echo FTP IP address, right? So I've got my IP address, my FTP thing here. So let's add some configuration here. All right, so these properties, when I come over in our properties resources files, so I can add these in here. And the way they'll look is I'll say like FTP IP address equals TP IP. Now this will pull from environment variables. You can pass these as Java args. When you're inside of Kubernetes, you can also pull these from a config map, right? So by default, it'll look for config maps that are sitting inside the same namespace. It'll pull out config maps if we want to use it as secrets. You have to tell it to use a secrets file, but you can pull these from a secrets file. But you can pull these out really easy. So Quarkus will look. I think that's the correct order. I think it goes Java environment config secrets, I believe is the order. And let's see, come here. And so that's going to pull all the stuff from local FTP IP address. And let's just do FTP plus, you know what, we'll do this. We'll just build this thing. So I'll build this FTP around. I've got some red. What's red here? FTP password. Ah. All right, so we're just going to use that. That'll just concatenate our properties files, return that, and we'll use this here from FTP string. Kafka greetings. Now, let's see if this... We can also just call Quarkus dev using the CLI. It'll kick off the same thing. For Maven, we'll build that and get a bunch of red. So no endpoint could be found for Kafka greetings. Is it just greeting? And bind this up. So it's going to look out. It's going to notice like, okay, Kafka. Maybe it's going to notice that Kafka greeting, please. Do I have Quarkus ext add camel Quarkus Kafka? Oh yeah, it was that. All right, so you also have to add the appropriate extensions. So now the extension should know dev mode's going to start up. It's going to boot this up. It knows that Kafka's already running. So it just FTP'd out to our site, processing a file. Come back over here. We can see things getting inserted into the database. Let's call our get. Select. We're not getting our greeting here. Where's my Kafka thing? So Quarkus intro. I'm here. Source. Main Java Kafka resource. Oh, we are listening to greetings. So greetings. Greetings. Yep. All right. So this guy should be. An S. Spin this up. Now we should be on the same topic, right? All right, there we go. Processing file for greetings text. So now we see a bunch of things got inserted because I attached to the appropriate topic, and there's a whole bunch of greetings that came over from Camel. All right, let's stop this. So a couple other things we can do. Mentioned one of the things, the idea is to make Kubernetes easier to use, right? So let's go here say Quarkus extension. We can add a Kubernetes extension. Extension add Quarkus Kubernetes. Kubernetes extension has been added. So now let's say Quarkus build. So when I build the app this time, it's going to compile. It's going to create a jar file that we can run. But it's also going to build a little config. So we'll skip tests. I know that's a bad practice. We'll skip our tests. It's also going to build out Kubernetes configuration files. So when this runs, greeting resource test. Didn't I tell it to skip tests? Okay. Maven clean. Compile, skip tests, and then we'll call Quarkus build. All right, so skip our test. We will build this. We're built, and let's come take a look at inside of our target folder now. I've got a Kubernetes folder, and I've got Kubernetes YAML here. So it's built out my deployment. There's my deployment config, right? Still got this IO snapshot, right? This thing I didn't tell. You can tell it the name of your appropriate, like Docker Hub or like whatever repo you're doing. I didn't set it. So it's got that. It's got a service built out. So if I already got a service to expose the application, right? It doesn't necessarily know what kind of ingress I'm using, right? So I can add that in. So it's very configurable. You can configure what you want to do. If you want to use like a config map, you can give it the name of the config map. It'll automatically say config map keyref and populate that out for you, right? So once you do that, you can kind of grab this folder and then use this as your jumping off point. Let's swap that out with something that looks a little bit more Docker friendly. Say V1. Let's replace all of those. And then, of course, because it's the Docker files there, it makes it really easy. Say Docker build x build. I'm going to call it Jeremy Davis / Quarkus Devnexus - 2223 intro V1 here. Yeah, the platform. Docker file native. You got to give it the Docker file. Huh? Say, sorry? Oh, yep, it is. Thank you. And so are you guys familiar with Docker build X, right? You guys know why I'm doing build X, because I'm on an M1, right? I'm building for Linux. What? Multiple platforms feature is not currently. Yeah, I don't need the ARM version anyway. All right. So Docker builds quickly. Like I've got my Docker file, and now I can say, Docker and I'm ready to go. I've got my version 1, so I can push that to my repo, right? All right, so fairly quickly, we built out CRUD applications, got a couple of different APIs for building out CRUD applications. I can do it just using objects. We can use it doing Spring annotations. We can use it doing JAX-RS annotations. I can spin up Kafka. I can integrate with like 2 different microservices. It'll spin up different databases for each of your microservices. Inside your database, inside the dev UI, like am I running? Let's go ahead and start running. Let's go Quarkus dev. Take a look at this again. So some of the other things it'll do inside of your dev services. Close to 88. All right, there we go. Like if we come inside of our persistence units, it's already built out a create and drop script for me, right? Which is really nice. There's also plugins, so like Flyway plugin, Liquid-based plugins. So if you want to do, migrations with these, while you're doing iterative development, you can kind of grab this stuff, copy this. You can use it to do migrations. And then Quarkus is a little bit heavier weight in development mode because this is development mode. This doesn't run like when I compile that jar file that I'm going to push to prod. This isn't part of that, right? So you're not going to have this in production. You're just going to have this in development mode. But you can come in, you can see any of the stuff that you're running in here. You can come in and see. You can see your Kubernetes manifest, right? Your whole configuration. You're not going to see that. Your whole configuration is in here. You can reset your database manually if you need to do that while you're building it. Your configuration editor, if you want to check and see, so there's my greeting properties. So if I want to change in the properties file here, I can do that. If you want to see, where's Postgres, Postgres is on, 63306. Like I said, it grabs random ports, right? That's not the normal. Postgres is 5432, right? So it's going to grab, various port numbers. That also means it allows you to run multiple ones in the background. So when I resumed testing there, when you do a Quarkus test, and the tests spin up a specific Quarkus test, it's going to spin up a separate version of Quarkus. So we've got this annotation, Quarkus test right here, right? It's going to spin up a separate version of Quarkus on a different set of ports. It's going to spin up a separate Postgres, a separate Kafka. So all this is going to run in your tests, right? You can do basically integration testing, using test containers in the background without having to write anything. All right, and I think that is what I've got for presentation. So any questions or comments? Yeah.
Before the Quarkus test, how would that work on a CI/CD pipeline? Does it always try to create new test containers, or?
So yes, by default, it will try to create test containers. You can turn that off, right? So you can configure it and turn it off if you want to do that. You can also use, if you want to use constructs, if you want to do verify, right, instead of test, you can do that. But you can certainly use, if you use an image where you can run test containers, right, then it'll just spin it up for you. Right. Oh, and so the question, in case, I guess, for the recording was, is it always going to spin up test containers in the background when you're using pipelines? All right, guys, well, thank you very much for coming. If you Quarkus for Spring developers is right after this, and book signing at 2:45 this afternoon.